Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Depending on who you listen to this weekend, there is a derby match happening at the Stadium of Light this Sunday as we welcome in-form Middlesbrough to Wearside and look to continue our own recent good run. As always, come rain or shine, we are here to preview the big game, and I'm delighted to welcome Dana from the rather excellent Boro Breakdown podcast. We've had Johnny, we've also had Tom from the Boro Breakdown, but we've never had you before. So how the devil are you? Are you doing well?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, Graham. How are you?
I'm all right, I think, but this is prior to the Watford game. So if any fans are listening thinking he sounds a bit chipper for a defeat, it's my fault. But I'm all right. Thanks for asking. I think there's tons of stuff for us to get to, right? And you haven't gone through this as yet on our podcast that we just did on yours, but I am going to ask you anyway. In the opinion of Dana from the Boro Breakdown podcast, is Sunderland versus Middlesbrough a derby? And if it isn't, what does the game represent to you?
See, I think it is a derby. I mean, if Cardiff and Bristol City is a derby, then I feel like Boro Sunderland is, right? But to be fair, my first season card was in the season we got relegated in 2008, 2009. So over the years, I haven't really seen Boro too much against Sunderland. I mean, I only saw Boro against Newcastle, I think, twice in that season where we went down because they went down too. So for me, this game is a derby. It represents one of those fixtures on the schedule where you look at it with a little bit more interest and intrigue. I do appreciate that for Sunderland fans, it's not the derby, and I completely understand that point of view. But I think for Boro fans, it is. Because let's be honest, we don't have much more, do we? We can't really regard Hartlepool as our rivals because of 1986 and them helping us out. So we've got an out, Graham. You've got to give us summit. I
think I'll let you have that. You explained it quite well. I'm happy with that. I think we both hate them lot up the road a lot worse, though.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, see, that's where we meet in the middle. The start of the season, that seems eerily, really familiar to last year for you, but you've won your last 4 games in a row out of, nowhere. So how's the mood with Middlesbrough fans at the moment? Because obviously, bad start, really on form at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely uplifted. It's weird because it feels like about 5 minutes ago I was on BBC Tees and I was thinking, God, we've gone backwards, we're getting worse. And now we are definitely getting better. Over the past 3 league games, we've obviously won them, and the performances have been good individually. We've had a very open game against Watford where it was chaos and we had a couple of setbacks, but we managed to win the game. Southampton before that, we were very good against them, very good, deserved the 3 points. And then the game against Cardiff yesterday, as you know yourselves, what we were mentioning on our pod, they sat back for a lot of that game and were very difficult to break down. So the fact that Boro put 2 past them, could have been more, I think is massive credit to us. So it's taken time and Carrick has experimented and he's got things wrong, a bit of trial and error. The system that he was implementing was very narrow on the forwards and it just didn't suit the players that we have, or at least it didn't suit the collective as well. And he's identified that it wasn't working and he's obviously sought to find a resolution for that and he's landed on a winning formula. So as much as Carrick is inexperienced, he's going to make mistakes. Fair play to him because he's identified that and he's turned things around. I don't know whether I can commit to saying that we've absolutely fully turned a corner yet, but we're definitely turning one, which is good because we started the season really poorly, as you mentioned.
I think looking at the Cardiff game, obviously that's your most recent one. We're including obviously a cup game that last 4 wins in a row, but a win's a win. You said the performance could have been more than 2. How was the performance? Because we played Cardiff the other week, and as we touched on the podcast we've just done with you, they're a sticky team that just sit back and they are hard to break down.
They are, yeah. You know what? They were set up in a 4-4-2/4-1-4-1, and it was really difficult for Boro to get Riley McGree on the ball in particular. I mean, he's our best player in my opinion, and he influences the game really well. And they were quite tight to him. They were cutting out those passing lanes to him. So they really stifled our best attacking player. So I think it was a game very important on patience. The crowd got a few groans and moans that here and there because we weren't really penetrating them with those passes, but we managed to break through, and I think that did open the game up. Because to be fair, I mean, Cardiff had a couple of chances, but it wasn't anything that they were a particular threat against us. So it opened the game up from there, and we got the second goal. We could have got a third, potentially a fourth. So we had chances, but it was not the greatest performance, but one of those really important ones where it was tough And at times it was turgid, and Boro weren't at their best, but they managed to power through, and they were patient, they broke through, they got the win.
I think, as we've sort of touched on already, if this game was played only 3 weeks ago, the last game I think we would have spoken about would have been the 1-1 draw with Sheff Wed, which from both sides ahead was drab, and I think some people said it looked like the league's worst two sides. But since then, beat Southampton, beat Bradford in the Cup, Watford away, and Cardiff, as we've just mentioned. You touched a bit on he's changed a few things, but what's changed in sort of team shape, formation, potentially, and most importantly, mentality in the fan base in that game since the Sheff Wed match?
Yeah, so in terms of tactics, Carrick was implementing a system where it was it's like a 4-2-4, and it didn't work. Now, context I think is important here, because last season we were building up in a 3-2-5, so we had the three centre halves. We had Ryan Giles at left back getting really high up the pitch, forming part of that attacking contingent up front, the 5 forwards. And it works because Ryan Giles was such a good player, and he's effectively a winger playing left back. That's his profile, his style. Obviously, we don't have Ryan Giles, so you have to find different ways to implement a different system. And he tried it with really narrow forwards, which just wasn't working. We kept cutting inside, either shooting and hitting row Z or it getting blocked. And we were moving into really congested areas. It was really difficult for us to actually click. We still had chances, man. Sammy Silvera's skied a couple from close range, which is so very Ashley Fletcher coded, because that's what he did when he was in a Middlesbrough shirt. And then he's changed back to, I wouldn't say it's a 3-2-5. It's more of a 2-3-6 in all honesty, because as I mentioned there, with the left back, with Ryan Giles getting high, getting really advanced up the pitch, it's kind of the same with the right back now. So we've got the 2 defenders, the 2 centre halves, the right back, the 2 centre midfielders, and then the forwards up front, the 5 forwards. So that's what's changed. And crucially, we've got width, which we didn't have, and our fullbacks are getting past the halfway line. So I think that's been really important. And the fans received the Southampton game really well, because the intent straight off the bat was to really press on them. And I think off the ball, we were a lot more aggressive in that game, whereas previously we weren't. So that was a real big game, because I think you could tell that the fans were really in tune with what the team were, the performance that the team were putting out there against Southampton.
When you mentioned Ashley Fletcher missing gilt-edged chances there, as Sunderland fans, we only had him for 6 months, but we do remember those times as well. I'm sure Sheff Wed fans will also agree. Talking of Sheff Wed, Cisco's under a massive amount of pressure. I know there's different things happening at that club compared to Middlesbrough, but you both had equally as bad runs, and you can maybe tell me if different, but it never felt like Carrick was under any sort of pressure from the fan base in any sort of way during that run. Look, every fan has their own opinion. There'll be one that went, I wanted him out at that point. But was there ever a point that you personally were worried about Carrick and the style of football? Was he ever under any pressure?
I wouldn't really say so, though. I mean, there was a point where my belief was weighing in, and I mentioned this on our pod. That was immediately after the Sheff Wed game, actually. I think Carrick has built up enough credit in the bank to work through this difficult period. Like, if you just got to get shot of a manager because of a poor start, bearing in mind the job that he did last season, then we're just going to become a Watford. Because I was actually, funny enough, we sacked Chris Wilder a year ago yesterday, and I was watching a few clips from our podcast that we did immediately after that, and I said that Carrick will be our 4th manager since 2020, which is very unlike Boro, because typically with Steve Gibson, you expect loyalty, you expect that consistency in manager. And so Carrick definitely deserved that time, absolutely. And it never felt like, even though we were shit, like it felt like we weren't 100, like we weren't a million miles away from being not shit. So I'm not surprised actually that we're in the process of turning a corner. But for me, I never wanted Carrick out. There were a few Boro fans that did, but I would say they were in the minority.
Funny when you said you didn't want to admit that you turned the corner there. It's such a Northeast fan thing. It's like, I don't want to say I don't want to say we've done it yet. We've won the last 15 games in a row, but I don't want to say it just yet. I don't like to go into Sunderland this early in the podcast, but there's obviously a man that connects us both. Sunderland fans love Tony Mowbray. Big fans. he's still a legend at Boro. I don't feel like there's any animosity towards him. But what have Middlesbrough fans made of Tony Mowbray's real impression at Sunderland, bearing in mind that he was with Middlesbrough? Yes, he was under different constraints, but he didn't have anywhere near as a successful time with yourselves as he did with us.
No, I think Boro fans hate the fact he's at Sunderland because he is regarded as a legend. So I don't think that will ever change, given what he gave for this club, not just as a player as well, by the way, obviously well before my time, but as a manager too, because Tony Mowbray laid a lot of the foundations for Karanka's promotion team. Like brought through Ben Gibson. I'm pretty sure he brought through Ben Gibson. Daniel Ayala, there's other players that escape me, but he definitely played a big part. Grant Ledbetter, actually, how did I not remember Grant Ledbetter? Brought in Grant Ledbetter, big part of that team, huge part of that team, in fact. And so I think with Tony Mowbray, a lot of Boro fans absolutely love him, but just hate the fact that he's at Sunderland. It's interesting with him though, actually, because he was a bit of a kneeling manager for us. He would get us into a good position in January, and then we would pretty much fall off a cliff. So obviously that didn't happen with Sunderland last season, so that's quite interesting. But he always strikes me, and I don't know whether you necessarily agree with this, Graham, as a manager that can only take a club so far and is very much a Neely man. But yeah, I think Boro fans do love Tony Mowbray, but they'll hate him on Saturday.
There was a few teams, a Blackburn fan that said very similar, a Coventry fan that said very similar, and I think there was an element of Sunderland fans that thought when Tony Mowbray came in that he would be a manager that would solidify us. And he got us in the playoffs, and now I'd be devastated if he left. So I really hope his brand and style of football does continue further forward. But I think there's a long few months to go yet to see whether he can take us further forward in the Premier League. But he's been great with us. But I think the opinion that you have is shared by Coventry fans and Blackburn fans. But hey, maybe he could be a Sunderland legend come the end of the season. I hope so. I think you look at the teams in the playoffs, talking of the playoffs, which obviously we both reached last year, ourselves and Coventry and yourselves, we've all lost the key striker. Jokerez left Coventry. You lost Akpom. We lost Stewart. Now, whilst we sort of got used to not playing with Ross Stewart because of his injuries, so it's a bit less of a loss if we're completely honest, Akpom was a huge part of Boro's first team, and 28 goals is a massive amount of goals to take out your team. I know you've won the last 4, but how much did his departure sort of alter things at the beginning? And how is life, as you said on your podcast, post Akpom?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I think with Akpom in that number 10 position, he was so good at keeping hold of the ball and taking pressure off Boro and allowing players to get up the pitch. I'm pretty sure that we were the most effective counter-attacking team in terms of goals scored from counter-attacks last season. So having someone that can pin a defender and allow his teammates to get forward was crucial. And his position was kind of loose in that team. He consistently floated around the right and linked the play on that side. So just having that link man, I think the absence of one has, I wouldn't say hurt Boro this season. I don't think that's necessarily the right word, but it's definitely shown because Morgan Rogers has been placed in that position. Matt Crooks has been placed in that position. Crooks is playing well at the moment in that role. I think he's effective at just slipping those balls in behind and combining well with players. That's what we've seen from Matt Crooks in the Middlesbrough shirt. Rogers is an interesting one where he's got that potential, but his first touch and his ball control is really poor. And it just puts a lot of pressure back on Boro rather than taking it off. And a lot of moves break down because of just a general lack of good ball control. So I think post-Akpom, obviously we don't have a player with that sort of narrative that we saw with Chuba, where it honestly felt like everything that he touched turned to gold. And I think there was a point against Hull where he span and had a shot and it just nestled in the bottom corner. I was thinking, bloody hell, he could literally do anything. It would probably end up in a goal. So we have lost a big goal threat and a big part of our team. But in truth, it's not just him. It's Giles too. It's Stefan. The departure of Stefan has definitely, I think Seny Dieng has helped that because he's probably on par with potentially even an upgrade on Stefan in terms of his distribution and his shot stopping, his commanding of his area. But there's just several parts of that team that are no longer here that were big influences, like Cameron Archer and Aaron Ramsey as well towards the back end of the campaign. It's very much post Loneys and Akpom that I think we're enduring at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of emphasis was put on Akpom, but you'd asked me before about which players I particularly would like to Boro, and I mentioned Giles, but obviously he's left and he's gone towards the Premier League now. Moved to Luton, which I'm not 100% sure is the right thing, but despite the players that you lost, Boro did start as promotion favourites. Like, a lot of people had them down as automatics and stuff like that. So on one hand, you could say, the start of the season completely changed that. But on the other hand, you could say that, you had potentially a worse start last year. I don't know the exact figures, but I'm sure it wasn't that far away. And then you made the playoffs. And I think a lot of people thought, because the momentum that you went in with, you could win the playoffs. I know Leicester and Ipswich look quite clear in front. Like, they do look pretty good. I don't know whether Ipswich will tail off. I doubt that Leicester will. With the way the season started, what is the aim for Middlesbrough? Is it to break into the playoffs and try go one better, or is automatic still kind of an aim for yourselves?
I don't know, to be honest, because I said second completely delusionally before a ball was kicked. And I don't think I fully registered how big an impact it would be losing those loan players. I think I had blissful hope that the players that we brought in would be just as good. And let's be honest, that's realistic. To have players like Archer and Ramsey that come in and just hit the ground running immediately was unprecedented. I think we didn't expect that. And to be fair, like, Boro fans will say, Boro were doing well before those players, but they just pushed us further into that playoff position. And I would say that we were tracking as the third best team in the league for an established point in that season. Obviously, Luton were got there in the end in third. But yeah, I mean, the expectation for me, if we get into the playoffs, that would be great. The Championship is very open, and I think it'll be very similar to what it was last season, bar maybe like Leicester and Southampton could turn it around, but Russell Martin's teams are very strange. It's probably the manager there that makes me question it. Defensively, a mess. Just pass for the sake of it. Leeds under Falk will probably be up there. Yourselves will be up there. I think if we get into the playoffs, I'll be happy with that. I don't think we'll get second. I'm pretty confident in saying that prediction for myself pre-season is not going to come off. But if we get into the playoffs, I think I'll be happy with that, because this is a team that is growing and learning and has new players from different leagues, different countries. And with that, sometimes you do get massive teething issues, and it takes them a while to really get embedded into the team, into the club, into the country. So I would say playoffs for me is the aim and expectation potentially.
Talked about the players that have left the club and Giles and Akpom, but there's been plenty of players that have come in. I know O'Brien was playing really well, and thankfully for us, he looks like he's going to be injured for a few weeks. He'll be missing the weekend. Yeah. But of the players that have came in, and I'll include O'Brien in that, because obviously I'd like to get your thoughts on him as well. But which of your summer signings have impressed the most? You mentioned Dieng before, but there's been quite a few that have come in.
Yeah, I would say Dieng actually, because Stefan was a big part of how we played. We used him as the chief trigger baiter and the press baiter, because having him on the ball in those areas where, like, my dad next to me is thinking, just fucking hoof it, why are you pissed about with the ball? He was doing that to entice that press so that Boro could pick teams off and exploit those spaces. And so Dieng isn't doing that. It's the centre-backs that are doing that this season. That's the key change, I think. But his shot stopping, I think, is better than Stefan's. His commanding of the area, I would say, is better than Stefan's. His distribution is on par. So I think he's been a really big signing. There's been a few, like Latte Lath, who you'll probably see at the weekend, is a bit of a meme, in my opinion. Like, he's so fast, but he's almost too fast for his own good. I don't know whether you saw a goal against Cardiff, but he cuts inside, he trips over his own feet, and he picks himself back up and curls the ball at the bottom corner. So he's got a lot of good things to his game, but it's probably the finishing that lets him down, in all honesty. Very quick, good movement, but finishing probably a little bit inconsistent. Lewis O'Brien was my pick of the signings this season, because I just think, the last time that he was in this division with Huddersfield, a lot of Championship watchers, avid Championship watchers, and even casual Championship watchers were looking at him thinking he should be in the Premier League. And obviously went to the Premier League, and because Forest signed literally everybody, he didn't get his opportunity. I think he got an illness as well. He was ill for a bit, so it kind of placed him a little bit down the pecking order. So him and Dieng, for me, are our best signings of the window. There's other players like Rodgers, for example, and Greenwood, who have potential. Greenwood, ex-Sunderland. I think he was there. There was that photo of him with Dan Neil, isn't it, for one of the cup finals or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that narrative as well there. But I think we've been big on potential this summer, and that will take time to reap the rewards, I think. To be fair, you've got a similar model to us in that you signing players with potential, but unfortunately for us, it's not quite clicked for a lot of these players yet.
You touched on Greenwood before, and the reason I kind of asked that question was to segment into that a little bit. I wasn't devastated that he didn't sign for us, but I would like to see what he could produce for us. I think, as you said before, he's obviously a Sunderland fan. He's gone to Arsenal originally, dropped down to Leeds. They've dropped down in division. He's come on loan to Middlesbrough. I think he's only played about 5 games, and I doubt any of those have been 90 minutes. Hasn't scored yet, but what sort of player is he? Is he looking like a player that's ready to sort of play Championship football regularly? Because he's been in and around that Leeds team for the past couple of years, hasn't he?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one, actually, because it's championship to championship loan, and I always find those are a bit weird. I think with Greenwood, obviously, he played against Cardiff yesterday, and he did look good. I think he was one of the best players on the pitch in a game that wasn't great, so I don't think anyone within the game individually was great, but he was good in that game. A little bit selfish, I would say, is what I've seen so far, but obviously he trusts himself, he's confident. I think I wouldn't say he's quick, but he's very incisive with his movement and with his passing and stuff. And he's an interesting one, because I think Leeds fans, all they really said to us about him is that set pieces, he's a good free kick taker, which is something that we've needed, to be fair. Our corners are shocking. So if you think that Boro will repeat the play against or from Cardiff and that we'll score a late corner, that ain't happening, because we probably won't get it past the first man. So he is an interesting one, Greenwood. Coming into this game off the back of the Cardiff game, it seems like he is that number 10 option, whereas we actually brought in Alex Gilbert from Brentford B, and we were thinking that he could be the number 10 this season, and maybe the backup number 10 option. He's barely played. Made his debut against Bradford and has basically been a bit of a ghost figure for us. So Greenwood is that option in the number 10 position. I'll be interested to see if he starts on Saturday, because Crooks is in good form, but Greenwood, it looks like he's got a point to prove. I think that's what I'll take from what I've seen from him so far. And to be fair, it's been small cameos and then that game against Cardiff yesterday. So not a big sample size, but it does look like he has a point to prove.
Talking of the young players, there was one person I did want to centre on. I've never really watched him, to be honest, outside of sort of the Championship highlights. He's 21 years old. Hayden Hackney. I seen someone on my Twitter feed the other day. Sorry, X, whatever you want to call it. Rated him at 25 million. And I couldn't say whether I agreed or disagreed with it. Is he Boro's best young player?
Yes, I would say so. He is a very technically gifted midfielder. Someone that's just a joy to watch. I said on our pod, it's like he has the ball attached to string to his boot. It never gets away from him. He's always very comfortable in possession. He's always looking for that pass to progress the play, to break through a Cardiff, for example. He always shows for the ball, very brave in possession. He's definitely one to watch from the game because he has the ability to dictate it. A good ball carrier as well. I don't know what valuation I would place on him. I think it'd be daft to get into that discussion because you could just band about any old figure, isn't it? Because to be fair, it's inflated by how the club values the player, not necessarily what their ability or ceiling is. But he's definitely one to watch. For me, I would say that if Boro don't get promoted this season, he'll be playing in the Premier League next season.
I think you should mention that, because I said something quite similar regarding Jack Clark, which brings me on wonderfully to the next question. I think both games were really enjoyable last year. Even I went to the away game. Unfortunately, a leaky ceiling destroyed me chance of going to the home game, but I did get a chance to watch it. Your win, arguably decided by the goal from Wally McGree and his performance. Our win, arguably won by Amad Diallo. So Amad's not going to be playing this weekend, as we know. I've mentioned Jack Clark there, but which players have stood out for you when you've watched Sunderland, and where are we likely to be able to attack you? Where are your weak spots?
Yeah, it has to be Jack Clark, obviously the division's top scorer, just a very, very, very dribbly player, and someone that we were linked with. Actually, there's been a lot of Sunderland Boro links in terms of like the transfer market and things like that, but he's someone that I think is just a fantastic player. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but he is. Let's be honest. Let's put leave the bias at the door. He's a good player, very good player, and coming up against. He'll be coming up against Tommy Smith. Tommy Smith is a good fullback, very solid fullback. I would probably be more worried if you switch sides and put him up against Lucas Engel. I don't want to I feel bad for saying this, but Lucas Engel, he had an absolute shocker against Sheffield Wednesday. He definitely picked up in performance against Cardiff, and that was notable, and it was really good to see that. So I still have questions though around Lucas Engel. Like, was that performance against Cardiff in isolation, or is this going to be his is he going to continue this? So I think that's going to be the big question of the weekend. Obviously Lewis O'Brien was playing left back, so that would have been interesting as well, because he's not a left back, but the way that we play pushes him forward into the areas that he wants to be in. So that's going to be a real key matchup at the weekend, just the fullback and wing area, because I feel like our weakness probably is Lucas Engel. As good as he was against Cardiff, there's still a lot of question marks over him. And I think in midfield as well, Hayden Hackney is fantastic, but there is, I think, a few holes in his game defensively. Because he pushes up, he leaves space in behind him. And I think that's probably where you may see a few fortunes from Sunderland. But that midfield battle is going to be very interesting. I think it could swing the game either way.
I normally ask for predictions at this point, but I'm going to change it a little bit. I think you asked me before was I excited for the game? What were my thoughts on it? And I think I said nervous, but and kind of calm at the same time. But I'm actually excited for it. I think two teams that are in good form. I know we're speaking before our game against Watford, but win, lose, or draw tonight, Sunderland are in good form, and Middlesbrough have won their last four. Two young teams, good young players. I think both sides are quite fearless in the way that they will approach the game. But how do you see it going? I know we've both got our own bias, and I feel like we can overcome yours, and you feel like your players can overcome ours. But in terms of the game, I think this could be a really exciting one. How do you see it going?
Yeah, you know what? In terms of a feeling, I'm probably excited and shitting myself in equal measure. I think because there's just a little bit more riding on this for Boro, because as I said, I think a lot of people are of the same opinion as me, that they regard it as a derby. You know what? I'm not really that confident, just because it's against Tony Mowbray. It's at the Stadium of Light. There's just something about that matchup that that kind of unnerves me. And it's probably a little bit from last season too, sticking immediately in the memory. And you do have a very, very good attacking team. And I think Boro defensively this season have been a little bit suspect at times. I think against Cardiff we were better. So there's signs that we're maybe progressing there, but I'm not, and I never have been really, of Middlesbrough under Michael Carrick, 100% certain that we're going to be good defensively. It's always been our issue. But last season we were able to you were able to ignore that to a degree because of how good we were offensively. Now that's not the case this season as such. So yeah, it's one of those games where I'm a bit nervous, but I'm hoping that the form that we're coming into this game with can just give us that little bit extra that is needed to get us a good result. Now, we will get on to predictions, I'm sure, but I think this will be a tight game, and maybe a draw is a little bit overdue.
Yeah, I'll give you my prediction. I said 1-1, as you know. But I do feel like we discussed it being that high scoring draw, and it wouldn't surprise me, because I think both teams will get at each other, and I think there's potentially that youthfulness in both sides could open up spaces, but I'm going to go 1-1. I do think it'll be tighter than we might imagine, as much as I've just talked it up as a really big, exciting game. But what's your thoughts if you're going to put a prediction on?
Yeah, I said 2-2, didn't I? I said that we'd come from behind and snatch a draw, and then it would feel like a win. And you know what? I would take that because, as you said, I think, winning 5 in a row would be massive, but that run has to end. And I think maybe it will, instead of hitting 5 in a row. So I would be happy with a draw, to be honest, just to keep the results ticking over and keep that good old momentum just going, because I feel like that's what we need. We just need to keep building, keep progressing, and see where we go from there.
I think a draw, in a weird way, would be a result that both of us would be okay with, I think, because both in good form, it means you're drawing in a derby, whether you're classed as one or not, I'm not too sure myself, but you class it as a draw. You think, well, a draw's all right in a derby, fair enough. But the fact that we're both on a good run of form, we could both continue our good run of forms by having a draw. So I think I'll take mine or yours, if I'm honest. I never like saying we'll take a draw, but I think I would in this case. But I've been on your show today. I've been on in the past as well. Where can we find all the Boro Breakdown stuff? Because I do listen, and it is very good.
Yeah, so we're on Twitter, Boro_Breakdown. We're on Facebook and Instagram too, but the pod's found on the usual podcast providers, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. Is that still a thing now? I think it is. I
think so.
We're all one of them closed down or whatever. I think it was, I don't even know what it was called, something catcher, I don't even know. But we're on most of the podcast platforms, and you can find us on YouTube as well.
Staying with mine, and you can subscribe if you want, but I don't care if you don't. Donna, thanks very much for joining me. No luck on Saturday, as I'm sure you would anticipate, but good luck for the rest of the season after that, apart from out of the game, all right?
Thank you very much.